Hello. Welcome everyone who's joining. I'm Shaya Hecht, psychotherapist, Brooklyn and Queens, New York. I'm so glad for everyone who's going to join tonight. We're talking about a very sensitive topic and one that resonates a lot with many people. So hopefully this will be meaningful and people will gain from the topic. So I'll just wait a few seconds for more people to join. The topic basically was triggered by some poems that were published in a magazine recently and got a lot of reaction. So based on that reaction, I figured we'd get on here and see if we could talk about this. I think it's a really important topic that resonates with a lot of people. So just the background is that there's a therapist named Mindy Blumenfeld, and she writes a column in the Bina magazine where these poems were published, and I'll review them for anyone who didn't see them. And there was a lot of reaction to it that we will try to address here. So I just want to honor the topic. It's a very sensitive topic, and it's something that probably many of you watching this, or you know people who have a lot of pain that they've experienced through this therapy, through therapy itself, through the relationship with therapists and that ordeal. And I want to just be very sensitive to that. And I hope that it could be supportive and that people could feel like I'm really getting it. I'm going to try my best. So obviously I'm a therapist, so I'm presenting from a therapist side of things, but hopefully what I've humbly learned from my clients. And anybody who wants to join in on what they think, they could definitely let their voices be heard. That's what this is about. So I'm going to start off by just presenting one of the poems, and then we're going to talk about some of the reaction that happens, and then give some explanation for why things happen the way they do. And then hopefully another poem if we have time, and then we'll do some questions that were pre-submitted. So the first poem, I'm just going to read it in case people didn't hear it, so that there's some context. So again, this is from a client of Mindy Blumenfeld, who sent her this poem about a real struggle that she was having within the therapy relationship, the therapeutic alliance. So the poem reads like this. I'm going to try to read it slowly, and I'm sorry for anyone who's going to come on in the middle, but it reads like this. I hate the way I feel about you. I hate that I can't get you out of my head. I hate that I need to text or email you when I should wait to talk to you instead. I hate when you don't answer, even though you're probably right. I hate that you're so logical when all I want to do is pick a fight. I hate that you make me go as soon as our 45 minutes are done. I hate that you have other clients to see. I hate that I'm not the only one. I hate how insecure I am. I hate that I feel like a freak. I hate that I can't live without you, and I need to come twice a week. I hate that I miss you. I hate that pain in my heart. I hate when you leave on vacation. I hate it when we're apart. I hate that I feel like this, always needing you to stay, and I hate that you don't feel the same way. I hate my pathetic attempts to get you to like me. I hate that I need you oh so badly. I hate this relationship. I hate that you can't be more. I hate that I need a hug as soon as I walk through your door. I hate that you're okay without it. I hate always having that urge. I hate that I need it so desperately. I hate feeling the wanting to merge. I hate so many things I can't even recall. But most of all, I hate that I don't hate you at all. So that was the first very emotional poem that this therapist received from the client. And when it was posted, a lot of people really, really resonated with this experience of the struggle with boundaries and the challenge of the therapy relationship, which is a very, very challenging relationship, and that's very valid. So I just wanted to review that for anyone who didn't hear it. So let's talk about the reaction. Some people really resonated with it, and some people were like, wow, I never had this type of experience before. Some people are like, why do people think about their therapist so much? I dread going to therapy. And some people just don't relate to the topic at all. So all of it's normal, and it all depends on our attachment styles as we grew up. So just a bit of an overview in case you're not so familiar. I'm really just going to talk about one attachment style mainly tonight. And so You probably heard of someone named John Bowlby who talked about attachment theory, and I don't want to get so technical, but there was a study done later by someone named Mary Ainsworth, and it's called The Strange Situation. You could look it up, where they were able to do a certain type of experiment where they were able to identify different types of attachment styles. So if people want me to go into the details of how that works, how that experiment went, I will definitely try to do that. But I'm afraid we might not have so much time because there's a lot to cover. So I'll probably just talk about what came out of that in terms of attachment style. And of course we could go back and explain the study that was done. But basically one of these styles is called ambivalent. Well, you might see different names: ambivalent attachment, anxious attachment, but basically it's an insecure type of attachment. Where basically children with this type of attachment, she found in the study that they were very clingy to their mother in new situations, unwilling to explore, very distressed when they're left alone by their mother, and they're scared of any stranger. And then when their mother returns, they're pleased to go to her when she returns for comfort, but then they cannot be comforted, and they may show signs of anger towards the mother. And there's an ambivalent attachment style that gets created from that, where the child can become pretty clingy and dependent, but also can reject the parent when interacting. So when this happens, when someone has this type of attachment style, and it comes mainly because the parent's probably inconsistent in their paying attention to this child. Sometimes they're available, sometimes not. So things are very confusing. The child's trying to reach out to the parent, but the parent's not necessarily responding, and the child's obviously affected by that and very upset by that and distressed. So if children who grow up with this type of attachment style, as adults, they're reluctant to become close to others, even as adults. They worry about their relationships with their partners. They're afraid that their partner doesn't love them. And of course, when relationships end, they become very distraught. So here are some just key features that you might see, which is that you might want a relationship very badly, and you crave the feeling of closeness and intimacy with somebody significant. However, you struggle to trust that they're really real and they really can be relied on as a partner. It could take over your entire life, and you could become very fixated on that person. You may find it difficult to observe their boundaries and be very upset by their boundaries, and you view the space between you and them as a threat, and you could feel panic or anger when those boundaries are in place. And a lot of your sense of self rests on how you feel you're being treated within this relationship. So you might feel anxious or jealous when you're away from this person, and you may use guilt or controlling behavior, quote unquote, we'll put this in perspective in a minute, looks like that, to get reassurance that this person actually is trustworthy and that they do care about you, because you're desperately craving that and you absolutely deserve that. So, but because of your early experiences, you haven't really had that secure attachment where that trust was able to be developed. So now as an adult, you're once again struggling within this relationship to find security and safety within it. Okay, so that's the concept of anxious attachment. So now when a person who's been hurt in their attachment relationships, so we could call that attachment trauma, we could call that complex trauma, developmental trauma, whatever these terms mean. But the bottom line is that within relationships, there's been a lot of hurt, right? Where the person was not consistent, was not able to provide that secure base. And there's a lot of anxiety and stress and mistrust. But yet we crave that connection because we need to connect in order to feel okay. So if that's been someone's experience, so now when they step into a therapy relationship, it's really difficult because once again, here's an attachment, right? Therapy is an attachment. So the therapist is an attachment figure, and now this client who's been so hurt by relationships is stepping into therapy, and there's already so much mistrust potentially, or confusion and low self-worth or things like that, and panic and anxiety when things don't seem like there's a secure relationship here. So naturally, it's going to be very, very challenging. And I think if anyone struggles with that, we need a lot of compassion for that. Self-compassion, compassion from the therapist, compassion from anyone working with somebody like this. This person has been very, very hurt, and therefore their brain and body's continuously trying to protect them from being hurt again. So it's questioning whether this is a safe and secure relationship, and that's only natural, and it should make sense. So in a sense, really, I don't know how many of my colleagues are listening to this, but us therapists are really guilty until proven innocent. And that's the way it should be, right? Because the person stepping into a relationship that already has an imbalance of power, because the therapist is quote unquote the expert and the client's vulnerable and needs help and feels sort of helpless the way they might have felt as a child within that relationship. Now they're stepping into therapy, which is very, very vulnerable. And therefore, the trust has to be earned, and that's the job of the therapist, to earn that trust. But of course, the client is going to have a very hard time feeling steady within this relationship, naturally. And therefore, they may do things that test this relationship, or they may be mistrustful of whether or not the therapist is truly caring about them. And that's something not to be ashamed of whatsoever, because again, it's something that you didn't get when you were young necessarily, or wasn't consistent, and therefore, it's only natural that that's happening now. And the truth is that in the therapy relationship, the therapist is supposed to be healing this. So, really the root of what this client is struggling with is relationship trauma, and therefore they can only be healed within a relationship. So the therapist represents that relationship that's going to be the healing relationship, but because that's where they've been wounded, that's where they're going to have a huge challenge. So this poem that this person wrote is so resonating with so many people, because it's all about having that struggle within the relationship. Do you really care? I hate that I have to think so much about you, because of course they're not sure. They're feeling anxious, and they wonder what the therapist is thinking about them too, right? Do you care about me? Is this going to be secure? Is this going to last? Or should I be terrified that this is going to end? Which again is only natural, and it makes a lot of sense. So because clients can present this way, it could be really challenging for the therapists. And I think here's where things sometimes spiral a little bit out of control, and clients get pretty hurt, which is a very, very sad reality, which is that because there's something called transference that could be occurring from the client onto the therapist, which means that they're really now re-experiencing these early relationships that were very challenging, and those feelings are now coming out onto the therapist. And because of that, the client's doing things to get reassurance that this is safe. So what they might start doing is testing this relationship in certain ways, right? And they might try to push the boundaries a little bit, which again, there's nothing to be ashamed of. It's again, them trying to find a place to land within this relationship, and it's hard for them to trust it. They want to see how you're going to be there for them, if you're going to be there for them, if you're going to care about them. So when that happens, a therapist might get triggered. So therapists are very human, and they might get triggered. And there's something called countertransference, where a therapist can feel sort of threatened by this reaction. And that's not okay, right? It's okay that it happens, but if the client will now get affected by this, it's not okay at all, because that could be re-traumatizing to a client. Because a client's whole struggle here is that they're not feeling safe and secure. If a therapist is getting triggered and getting so overwhelmed with their own stuff, and they are treating their client not as a client, but as their own early relationships or whatever that have been challenging for them, now they're not helpful to that client anymore, and they're actually going to re-traumatize them, because they're going to not help them feel safe and secure and seen and soothed, and instead they're going to push back or blame and isolate the client and do all kinds of things, and that's really not healthy and not okay, right? So obviously therapists need to have a way to deal with this, because they have to make sure that they're objectively there only for the client. So therefore, one of those things that help this relationship stay safe and that counter-transference not affect the client, one of those things is very, very clear boundaries, which is exactly one of those things that's very frustrating for the client, because it's now unclear what's our relationship like if you're going to have boundaries. Do you actually care? But boundaries actually are that protect part of one way that this thing remains protected in a way where the client doesn't become re-traumatized. Right? If there are no boundaries, then the therapist is not going to be acting like that therapist, and there's going to be potential for re-traumatization, as we said. So therefore, the boundaries have to be very clear and very in place. Now, obviously, I think should be flexibility based on each client's specific needs. But there's going to be a line that says the client ends here and the therapist starts here. And that's going to be very, very frustrating, as we explained, and very difficult to navigate. However, it's also what's going to keep this safe and But it's hard. It's really, really, really tough. So, just to review, so there's something called an insecure attachment style. And naturally, that's a wound within relationships, so it has to get healed within relationships. But before that, adult attachments are similar in the same way that they mirror sort of the way that they were when you were in your early relationships. And therefore, when you come into a therapy relationship, it's going to be very challenging. The insecurity is going to be there, the mistrust, and all those things are going to be there. It's a therapist's job and not a client's job to make sure that the client's not re-traumatized. Sometimes boundaries do get crossed, and the clients start to blame themselves, and it's really not their fault. It's a therapist's job. I don't know how many times I could say this and how to say this clearer. It's a therapist's job to maintain and to establish those boundaries and to be very clear about them in a way where a client's really being kept safe, but also where the client can express frustration and challenge within these boundaries and raise their questions of trust and mistrust in a way where the therapist they're human and they might be reacting inside, but it's not something that they could bring up to the client. Now, if they do and they make a mistake, that happens, then they have to do a repair. But obviously, it's the therapist's job to keep it safe and to remain objective and to have their own spaces where they deal with the challenge of therapy and the way that clients might be affecting them. So I hope that's clear. I'm just going to pause to see if there's some questions and see if I missed anything. Okay. So I'm gonna read the last poem that also came out, which was basically a poem, I think, written by a client of therapy. I don't think it was Mindy's client, but a client of therapy, where this client tried to present what a therapist might be feeling. And it got a lot of reactions, actually, very interesting ones that I'll try to review a little bit. But I'm just going to read what that poem is. So again, this is a client trying to present the perspective of a therapist. And it reads, I hate that you're in pain. I hate that I can't fill your void. I hate that I can't fix the situation and that you feel annoyed. I hate that you have to go when our session is done. I hate that until I see you again, you're completely on your own. I hate to watch you suffer. I hate to see you in pain. I hate sometimes feeling when a session has been in vain. I hate that I may make it harder. I hate that I'm no magic wand who can make your pain disappear so it's gone, gone, gone. I hate that I cannot hug you. I'm sometimes at the verge. I know I don't show it, but I too have the urge. I hate that you don't know how my heart aches for you, and that many times throughout the day I think about you too. I hate that I cannot tell you how much you're on my mind. I hate that you think I'm just trying to be kind. I hate that boundaries are so hard, yes, even for me. I hate that I can't show you my own vulnerability. I hate that you're so hard on yourself. I hate that you feel like a freak. I hate that our contact is limited to just twice a week. I hate that we can't be friends. I hate that I can't be more. And honestly, I hate to see you out the door. And I hate that you think I'm perfect. I hate that you think I'm a saint. I hate that you think I'm superhuman. But dear client, I ain't. So there's some strong language there, hate, and I think they changed it in the magazine, I'm not sure. But here, that was a potential representation of what a therapist is feeling, and people started reacting to that and saying, is this true? It's so hard to believe that that's true. Do therapists really feel this way? And actually, therapists were writing to me that they absolutely do feel this way. I think that the best way to get through this is to not try to figure this out so much. Obviously, we have to try, and therapists should show their care and concern. But like we said before, it's only natural that there's going to be mistrust starting out in this relationship. So I could tell my clients, and I could tell everybody here that I care about them so much, and I really do. But if my client not trusting that, then I'm not honoring them by reassuring them that I care about them only. I'm going to honor them and help them heal by making space for them to be frustrated by me and to be frustrated that they can't trust that I care about them. That's what's going to help them heal. Because when they were young, they weren't allowed to have those type of feelings. They weren't allowed to challenge relationships. They were actually isolated and probably hurt because of exactly that type of emotional frustration, experience, reactions, behaviors. So of course, a therapist should show their care and concern and love for their clients. But trust is something that's earned and not something that's shoved down a client's throat. So therefore, hopefully over time, a client starts to learn that there's trust within this relationship because the therapist has earned it. However, the therapist has to make room for this question ongoing throughout this whole experience, where a client's wondering, like, do you really care about me? And the client's allowed to vent that type of frustration. And the therapist's job is to, again, not allow traumatic countertransference to come out on the client, and to remain objective and consistently regulated so that the client can feel safe doing that, so that they can regulate and they could feel seen, secure, soothed. And in that experience, that's going to heal that attachment wound that they have come for, right? So it's the boundaries and the frustration within this relationship that's going to be the mechanism for healing, which is really interesting, because the most frustrated part of the therapy is what's going to provide the healing, assuming that the therapist is staying safe and the client is allowed to test this and work through this really big challenge. So I'm going to try to address some questions that came in. I hope that was clear. It's a sensitive topic and trying to not trigger anyone here, so I hope I'm doing a good job. So here are some of the questions that came in. How do we not let ourselves become in love with our therapist? I feel it's impossible. Very common question. So it sounds like this person's trying to fight this exact challenge, right? Once again, the challenge in and of itself is the wound. The wound is within the relationship. There is a wound here that was created through relationships. So now this person's trying to stop the natural emotions that they're feeling towards their therapist. But really, those natural emotions need to come out so that the therapist can provide a corrective experience for this client, no matter what those feelings are, where the client can hold a space that's safe and secure, where the therapist can be an empathetic witness to whatever they're going through, and they could really help the client feel like they're valid, whatever they're feeling is valid. So I would not try to push away any natural feeling. I would actually allow whatever feelings to happen, so that, because it's probably a transference of feelings from a different relationship, and there has to be, and it's unresolved. So through working through these emotions in a safe and secure way, it's going to get resolved. So I would not necessarily try to push anything down. I would actually bring it up to the therapist that this is what I'm starting to feel. And it's a therapist's job to remain safe and secure and help the client through that experience. So I hope that answers it, because this person needs a co-regulator to help them through that experience. And very likely they lack the co-regulator. So they're feeling very dysregulated by these experiences, but really they're okay. As long as the therapist can provide a safe space of regulation, the client's going to get through that and actually feel more secure and more safe, even within those challenging emotions. Okay, someone asked, I don't struggle with this. Am I normal? We addressed that in the beginning, that there's different types of attachment styles. I don't want to get into that in such detail. Someone's asking, is it worth having this relationship for the gain? Is the pain more than the gain? How would one know? Sometimes this feels like this causes way too much pain that wasn't there before, and it gets one to wonder if it's all worth it. It's sort of a double-edged sword, because by the time this realization hits, it's sort of too late to end it because of exactly that pain. Very raw, real question that probably resonates with a lot of people. Is this worth it? And to me, from my side, which is easy for me to say, right? And I grant that, is that, again, the wound is within relationships. And the only way that that wound can get healed is if there's a corrective experience within a relationship. So this pain really is the only way into healing this type of relationship, is bringing up all the pain that relationships cause this client and providing a corrective experience that's safe, secure, and loving, and compassionate to work through all of those challenges in order to do that. Now, this person's saying that once they realize that they're in pain over the relationship, it's too late. So I don't know why it's too late. I think if the therapist is a safe person, then they can bring up their feelings to the therapist, and the therapist should be able to help them navigate that. If the therapist is having countertransference and unloading their own stuff onto this client and re-traumatizing them, that's devastating, that's terrible. The challenge here is that a lot of times clients don't know that. They don't know that they're allowed to have a voice. Sometimes they can't trust what's going on because the therapist is quote unquote an expert. And that's really, really challenging for a lot of people. And I guess the best thing that I could say is to try to pay attention to your gut and just notice if you're getting uncomfortable, and to bring it up to your therapist and see if they're helping you feel better about it. For sure, reach out to somebody else who has some experience with this type of stuff and explain what's happening to you. and see if they can guide you, if there's a safe person. But if it's not a safe therapist, which it can very well be, then you got to get out of there, in my opinion. And you have a right. You have a voice, right? Therapists you're the expert of what's best for you, and this is not good for you, so you got to go. Someone asked, is it because I love my therapist so much that I'm looking for reasons to hate her? And again, this is a similar question where someone's loving their therapist, but it's hard to trust that. It's hard to trust and that they won't be hurt. And there may be a part of them that's resisting that and causing them to not really fully invest themselves within this relationship. So they might be looking for things that create that type of distance. And lastly, there was a question, is there a difference between transference and codependency and love addiction? So I don't want to get into love addiction so much, but yes, there's a difference between transference and codependency. They're very, very different. I think it might be a topic for a different day, but briefly, transference is, again, the feelings that you had from your primary relationships or early or other relationships that are now being transferred onto somebody else. And in therapy, that would be the therapist. Codependency is a very different type of, similar but different type of dynamic. Really started in the addiction world where it was the people who were in relationship with addicts who were dependent on the addict's addiction in order to feel okay. And that's been branched out into a broader other relationships as well. So let me just look at the chat real quick because we have to end. I think someone asked a question. Oh, doesn't therapist act of making sure that the client is seen, safe, and soothed, a way that can lead to an unhealthy relationship with the therapist? Anything could be an unhealthy relationship with the therapist. I'm not sure how that specifically, seeing the client and helping them feel safe and soothed, is unhealthy. That's, I think, something very healthy to, again, around boundaries, because there's very clear boundaries that are very clear, and it's a therapeutic relationship. Then the therapist is just holding a space where the client feels seen, safe, and soothed within their struggle. So I'm not sure what it means that it can lead to, that itself can lead to unhealthy relationship. I don't know. I think in general, just the being alone with a therapist for sure, and then just the power dynamic and the vulnerability of a client can definitely be a problem. So taking care of I see you're saying by taking care of them, they're supposed to take care of them in a certain way, right? But they're not like a parent where there's no boundaries and they're always, there are boundaries, but where the availability is all the time and they're talking, whenever they need, and they're in distress and they're expecting them to be there right away. Those are not things that a therapist should be doing for that client. And that's very frustrating for the client. And again, that's something to bring up in the therapy and to work through. And in that case, the therapist doesn't make themselves more available and less boundaried, right? It maybe helps them be a little more flexible in some way, but there's going to be boundaries that are very tight, and they're going to take care of them by seeing them and allowing these emotions to come and holding a safe space for them with a lot of compassion and empathy. I hope that answered it, and I hope I covered this topic with sensitivity, and I hope it was clear. And of course, if anyone has any questions or needs any follow-up, let me know. Have a great night, everybody. Take care.